Great. And the way that we're going to manage the question queue is that you will write in the chat box your question, or sorry, you just write your name and your affiliation, and then we can give you the mic to ask your question. If you want to just make a comment in the chat, that is fine too. But if you want to speak, it would be great if you could let us know that and get in the queue. We will have a 3-minute timer going for each person that is providing comment. And if your time is up, I will interrupt you at the end just to ask you to close it out, and you can move to the end of the queue if you have more to say. So that is kind of how we're going to manage all of this time. If you're on the phone, you won't be able to, if you're calling in, use the chat box. You can use the raise your hand, which is *9 on your phone. And then after each person speaks, if any CWCB staff have any quick responses that they want to make to the public comment or clarifications or anything like that, CWCB staff can use the raise your hand function to let me know that you have something to say. I think that's pretty much all of it. We will spotlight you when you're speaking for your comment, which means that everyone will be able to see you. And just to remind you all about our affiliation, or sorry, our interpretation services. If you're talking too fast, you might see me or Lizbeth doing this, which means to please slow down so that she is able to interpret what you're saying. I think that's everything. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Russ Sands, and he is going to give an overview, and then we'll open it up for the question queue. If you know you have a question already, you can please let us know in the chat box, and we'll get you in the queue for after Russ's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Thanks, everyone. I want to pause real quick and just getting some chats on the side if we need to do a check on the Spanish channel. Elizabeth or Kat, are we good to go?
Yeah, Elizabeth, I think we're just hearing that your audio is cutting out just at the end of your sentences, but people are saying it's getting better. So I just wanted to pass it along. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here tonight. It's exciting to kind of be starting this phase of the process. As many of you know, I see a lot of familiar faces on here and also some new faces, which is really encouraging and exciting. But we did about, gosh, maybe more than a year ago now, do some initial kind of listening sessions. Then we went into a full scoping period. But for especially some of the newcomers that may not be as familiar, I want to at least do a little bit of overview on the water plan, and we'll try to keep it short and just save time for comments. Real quick, just for setting, again, I'm Russ Sands with the Colorado Water Conservation Board. The Colorado Water Conservation Board is a policy group, so we don't set regulation. A lot of what we do is really around convening groups or helping support stakeholders and kind of setting the course that we hope others will go down. But that's a little bit different setting and context. There are many agencies that we do work with. Some of those are regulatory. There's a lot of groups that we work with. One key feature is that we do not build water projects. We do help fund a lot of water projects, but we're generally not the ones that are actually building them. So we generally fund those with grants and loans that we offer. And I think many of you know, but this is the first update to the Colorado Water Plan, but the original or inaugural water plan came out in 2015. And it was really built as a living document and incumbent upon us, and a part of some of the scenario planning in the original water plan is really to kind of take these incremental pauses and check on where we're at. And then you'll see our mission for the organization in the corner as well. And really that focus on conservation and wise water development in the state is really what we're all about. So this is the lens through which we approach the water plan, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. I think maybe this is, if you have really good eyesight, you can probably read this. It's pretty tiny, but I think it drives home the point that we are one of many agencies. So somewhere at the bottom there, you'll see the Colorado Department of Natural Resources with Colorado Water Conservation Board nested under it. So again, just kind of speaking to the breadth of government agencies, and many of these other groups also work on water issues, and we've tried to engage with several of those on the front end of this. So that's not something that should really be discouraging, but it's really about how we build collaboration, and as a policy agency, that's what we're all about. In fact, many of you that are on the call are our partners, and for those of you that are new, we're hoping that you will become our partners in helping us solve our future water challenges. The water plan is nothing if it's not an iterative process. We're kind of always in some sort of update cycle, and we kind of are implementing at the same time. So it's this constant plan, implement, and so the comments that you're making tonight and through this process really build on a rich history, I would argue, that extend well before the original water plan. But if you just look at all these documents, and on the bottom you're seeing some of the groups or working groups that we've had along the way, our process is always an inclusive one, where we're trying to bring in stakeholders and find a way to do things, or a better way to do things in many cases. So the technical data that informs the Colorado Water Plan has its roots in that 2019 document. We planned with stakeholders along the way, and then that led directly into the basin implementation plans. For those who aren't familiar, there are 9 basin roundtables. These are grassroots organizations across the state that are some of our primary stakeholders. Of course, we partner with anyone and everyone, but those legislatively defined stakeholder groups really help give us input, and they define kind of what their local challenges are and help identify project needs and costs. And through this process, before all this feeds up into the water plan, we also interrupted that process to get some of the scoping that I talked about at the beginning, some initial listening sessions, and then also a water equity task force. So we kind of paused and tried to get some perspective on how we needed to consider equity, diversity, and inclusivity in the water plan. So again, all the comments that you're going to be giving us are building on this history and feed into the water plan. As part of that legacy, we incorporated a lot of the original, underpinnings of the 2015 plan. So these are the kind of 3 initial water plan values, and I'll just quickly read them for the translation channel as well. But a productive economy that supports vibrant and sustainable cities, agriculture, recreation, and tourism, an efficient and effective water infrastructure, and a strong environment with healthy watersheds, rivers, streams, and wildlife. The missing value here that was really a footnote maybe in the original water plan, but an important one, we always kind of saw as the kind of hidden value. And so we've just owned that in this plan to understand the importance of resilience. The original water plan was really born out of resilience and drought resilience specifically. So this last value speaks to an informed public with creative, forward-thinking solutions that are sustainable and resilient to changing conditions and result in strong, equitable communities that can adapt to and thrive in the face of adversity. So I've shown this slide many times, and you've probably seen it online as well, but I think it's helpful to think of, to ask that question: what is a water plan? And we see it very clearly as kind of occupying 2 spaces. On one level, it's the biggest megaphone that we could have. It helps set the stage for collaboration and resilience, and helps us highlight all those important issues in the state that we need to work on collectively and together. On the other hand, in its most simple form, it's really a strategy document for CWCB. Like many other strategy documents that other agencies have, this is really the operating plan for CWCB on many levels. So we take that approach, and you'll see that kind of play out in the water plan. And the way that we do that is by recognizing that a lot of the good work that happens in the state, and I saw one of our CWCB directors, Director Felton, he always says that the good work happens at the local level. We're a local control state, and we need local partnership, not only to advance initiatives in the water plan, but to also innovate and be creative. So you will see in the water plan 50 partner actions. These are examples. These are certainly not anything to be constrained by. There are limitless number of actions that could probably be developed. We tried to identify 50 examples of the type of good work that we need to see in the state that are emblematic of the types of things that we would fund. Generally, our funding source that we think of tied to the water plan is the water plan grants, And what I just brought up are the 5 buckets or areas of water plan grant funding. So conservation and land use, watershed health and recreation, engagement and innovation, water supply and storage, and agriculture. Of course, there are many funding opportunities, especially now at the federal level and through other local grant efforts that we help support, like the Water Supply Reserve Fund. And there are other agency grants as well, but we've tried to make clear ties to this grant source by means of helping with those interested in applying for a grant see the opportunities that might be presented of where they could come in for a grant. And that was a really clear piece of feedback we got to make those examples clear to support grant funding. And I will call out, just because I know it's a piece of input that we've gotten here, one of those areas is water storage and supply. Storage is obviously an important piece of operations in the state. I think some of the input that we've heard is storage isn't always the solution. Of course, that's true. There is no one silver bullet or solution to many of our challenges. We have to embrace them all. And certainly with storage, we see the need for increased nimbleness and thoughtfulness. And I think we frame it up in this water plan as wise storage. The other piece that you'll see very clearly are the 50 agency actions. Those are the things that CWCB or our partner, or I guess I should say our collaborating agencies, will help us complete. In some cases, those collaborating agencies are leading or co-leading with us. In many cases, we're the lead and they're supporting. But these are the things really looking through that lens of the feedback that we heard. What are the things that we could do? What are the areas that we can help innovate? And really a lot of these center on how we can create research or tools or convene groups that help our stakeholders and help advance some of those local initiatives. Increasingly, I think we hear a lot of feedback of putting more tools in local stakeholders' hands. Of course, all of this is organized in the plan around these 4 areas. You heard Elizabeth speak to that at the beginning. On a very high level, that's farms, cities, rivers, and people. But of course, those words are probably not broad enough. And so when we think about these areas, we've called them vibrant communities for all things cities, all things municipal. Of course, understanding that means sometimes very small municipalities, some that are maybe very ag-centric, but also our big, metro areas. Robust agriculture, thinking about our farms, our ranches, our acequia communities, local food. Thriving watersheds, the topic of tonight, really focusing on tonight. Environment, thinking about our watershed as a whole, forest health beneath it, recreation and environment, stream health. All of the things that really support a healthy environment and really have cascading impacts across the state in terms of supporting all the areas that we enjoy, providing water from our headwaters down to our farms and cities. And then resilient planning is really carve out to talk specifically about climate adaptation, recognizing that to be adaptive, we need to have an engaged public, and that means we have to be including and thinking of everyone. And I'm really excited about some of the good work that we've done in this space, and specifically appreciate Lizbeth being on tonight and helping translate, and those of you that have joined on either channel. But it's really exciting to recognize that to be more resilient, we inherently have to embrace equity as a piece of that. That's how we get there. And that government has a role in how we can be supportive, whether that's helping provide access or funding, or in some cases, cutting red tape. So those are the 4 areas. Of course, they're interconnected and intertwined. You can't think about one without thinking about the other. Our rivers connect us all and connect all these areas. That said, for organizational purposes, we've divided it into these 4 areas, and we reference the other areas within them. Each of those 4 areas has a vision. I won't read this full text, but I will just read the first sentence, that our vision to enhance watersheds includes recognition that Colorado's watersheds hold the future of our water supply security. So important to everything in our state. And I'm really excited about the comments that we're going to get tonight about that. These visions all really feed up into those values that we talked about. And so you'll see these Colorado visions in each area of the plan. All of that water use, I highlight this, we've already gotten some feedback, so I just wanted to clarify that, we have many demands for water use across the state. We hear a lot from our agriculture community that sometimes when they see that high number of 90% use, that may be out of context in terms of what gets returned back to streams. And so I will say the same is true for municipalities. So this graph is, I think a couple of folks have approached me about this, but to be clear, this the graph, the pie chart on the left-hand side expresses kind of the areas of water use across the state. And those are broken down into our actual consumption of water use. Whereas on the right-hand side, that top right-hand bar chart, you're actually seeing the total demand. So that what you're seeing is a larger number because those are the demands that are the diversions of where's water is being taken, but understanding that some of that is lost through conveyance or leaks or evaporated, or some is just returning to flows, whether that's through a wastewater treatment plant or irrigation. There are many opportunities for return flows back into the system. And there's kind of a little image of that on the bottom right-hand corner. These are all graphics that are in the water plan update. And I think this is my last slide, but it will just highlight, important feature that was carried over from the 2015 plan is scenario planning. And scenario planning is looking at the future and kind of looking at a range of possibilities, understanding that we may not be able to pick one exact place that we're going to end up, but hopefully if we look at a range, we're going to get a high and low, and in this case, a high and low expectation of how much water we might need in the state. So when we're looking at those bigger diversion demands, a lot of those are kind of based on that future need. So there are 5 scenarios that appear in the water plan. The data has been run down underneath those to kind of express how much future need we might have. And so we see up to, in that last scenario on the far right, up to a 740,000 acre foot gap by 2050. Now, this is the municipal gap, but I would say how we grow and meet that gap matters everything. We need to do that in a way that's responsible, that uplifts agriculture, protects our watersheds, and secures our cities. So that number, of course, could be augmented and get bigger if compact issues or aging infrastructure are brought to bear. But either way, our solution sets and our need to focus on this demand and to solve our challenges together is still critical. So to offer a little bit of hope, I would say, obviously we see climate change driving those numbers. So we see a 4.2 degree Fahrenheit increase in that top scenario that you're looking at. But we also see it in that other scenario, and the next scenario beneath it. And it reminds me of this Brad Udall quote that climate change is water change. And he adds that there's hope, and there is hope. Water conservation isn't a silver bullet, but very clearly in these scenarios, we see how much of an impact it can have. One of the defining differences between those two scenarios is we have the highest climate change in both. We have the highest population change in both, or growth in both. But we have significant 10% reduction in water conservation across the state that's kind of embedded in that scenario D that you're looking at. And that drives the numbers down. So again, there's no silver bullet. It's going to take everything we have, but this importance of recognizing all our tools and working together is a common theme. So we hope that tonight, as you're giving comments and hearing this, that please, if we've gotten something wrong, or if we could say something better, if you have something you think we need to add, that's what this is about. We want to hear that. But we hope that you'll also take that next step and commit to action. Again, we can't do this alone. We need everyone pulling together. And I think trying to make a commitment to really being more inclusive, recognizing that we need more creativity and more people working together is so critical. And if you have already done a great project or something that's emblematic of the type of change we need to see, by all means, share your story. And all of these options are available to you online on Engage CWCB. But when we talk about commitment to action, I will just say that has many flavors. At a basic level, everybody being engaged in personal water conservation is so critical. It has been for a long time. We need to double down on that now. Knowing where your water comes from, this is a role that you can play. You can also get more involved if you have the time and interest, attending meetings like this one, or going to local roundtable meetings or board meetings. Get involved with local water issues, work with local nonprofit groups, make your voice heard. And if you can, and you're interested, and we've made those linkages clear and accessible in the water plan, apply for a grant from CWCB or from others for water, but take that next step to help us innovate and make the good work happen on the ground level. And again, all this is on Engage CWCB. Much of this is already recorded and posted there, but I thought it would be helpful just to set the stage for tonight, and I will turn things back over.
Thanks, Russ. All right, I'm gonna go over our question queue process again, and then we'll go ahead and dive right into our public comment. So what we are, oh, and this is in the chat so you can see it as well. But if you would like to make a public comment, please let us know in the chat with your name and affiliation, and let us know that you have a comment. If you're on the phone dialing in, you'll hit star 9 and you'll be able to get your hand raised. We're asking that only the CWCB staff use the hand raise function if you're on Zoom, so that we can track the queue better with the chat. So you'll have 3 minutes to talk when it's your turn, and we'll have a timer queued up here in a minute that you'll be able to see. And at the end of 3 minutes, I will politely ask you to close, and you can move to the end of the chat if you have, the end of the queue if you have more to say. At the time that you're done speaking, if any of the CWCB staff have any responses, if you all could please raise your hands, and then we could respond to the public comment. And as I said earlier, I think if we have clarification and or quick comment responses, that's great, but we really want to reserve most of the time for the public to speak today. So try and keep your responses short and concise and to the point as well. I think that's everything. Our first person in the queue is Katie Gill, and then on deck we'll have Kat Haber and Bart Miller. So when you are able to speak when it's your turn, if you could state your name and your affiliation for the record too, that would be great. So Katie, we will get you going once we have our timer ready. I think we need to get that spotlighted. Okay, and let's get Katie unmuted. Are you here?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So thanks for the opportunity to comment. I appreciate it. And I'm here representing Save Bear Creek Lake Park. We do recognize absolutely the water supply challenges that we face in the state. And everyone is going to have to make sacrifices to secure Colorado's water future. What I really appreciate about the water plan is how it creates long-range goals and advocates for innovative solutions toward more efficient and sustainable water use and storage. I'm also sure that you're aware of a feasibility study which is being conducted by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers toward a potential reallocation of Bear Creek Reservoir. I know you don't build water projects, but it's part of the plan. And a 20,000 acre-foot reallocation to water storage from flood control is being considered, same volume that was approved in Chatfield's reallocation. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with the Bear Creek Lake Park and specifically those regions in the core of the park, which would be inundated in such an expansion. But I'd welcome the opportunity to do a site visit with any staff members at CWCB or directors. I've been in correspondence for a few years with Special Projects Coordinator Eric Skye. He's been extremely helpful, very responsive, and was kind enough to do a site visit with me through the park. And I think he might be in the Grand Canyon right now or something, not sure. Compared to the 20,000 acre-foot reallocation at Chatfield, a similar expansion at Bear Creek would be, even half of that would be dramatically more impactful than Chatfield's reallocation due to the much smaller size of the park and also the relatively flat topography that would be inundated. A few impacts of a 20,000 acre-foot reallocation, since we're here talking about thriving watersheds, would be inundation of over a mile of Bear Creek and 3/4 of a mile of Turkey Creek and 75 acres of wetlands, which includes almost a square mile. It's the majority of the shady forested trails and picnic areas within the park. It's really the heart and lungs and the core of the park. So these watersheds obviously provide habitat to hundreds of species of birds, a wide range of terrestrial and aquatic life. Humans also enjoy these watersheds, and the park hosts nearly 1 million user visits each year. In terms of outdoor equity.
Katie,
Oh.
that's the end of your 3 minutes. So if you wouldn't mind getting back in the queue, we can get you up after our next couple people.
Okay, can you put me in the queue, or do I need to put that in the chat?
I'll put you in the queue right now. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay. All right, a couple quick reminders. I know we only have 3 minutes for each person, but we do need to try and speak in a conversational speed so that our interpreter can track all the great input that we've got being shared. And then like with Katie, we'll put you back in the queue if you need more than 3 minutes. So with that, Kat, you're up. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello, everybody. Kat Haber here. I am zooming in right now from Homer, Alaska. That's a glacier in between those trees. It's receding 98 feet a year. I don't want to complain, so I'm going to go straight to solutions. I walked across the country in the Great March for Climate Action in 2014, and the key word there is action. We must stop fracking right now. We are taking our precious drinking water and toxifying it forever. I agree with the previous speaker, long view. How can we produce our energy with little or no demand on our scarce waters? Number 2, water justice. Make sure that all residents of Colorado have affordable access to drinking water, and certify that landlords are providing healthy water to renters, including trailer parks. Take the privatization of profits and include the socialization to communities of color, the cost. We've got to flip that script and work on it together. Fully fund water plan grants, especially conservation. We humans are threatened, but imagine all of the other species that are in the middle of the 6th mass extinction. So protect our watersheds. Yes, fund innovation. Yes, storage. Incentivize small scale and local farming. And I agree, water supply reserve fund, so important. And why not increase water fees disproportionately to the most profitable companies, scaled to the amount of water that they are taking out of use? This is particularly true for frackers. And then finally, solution is collaborate for a regional solution of covering the American Canal with solar panels to dramatically reduce evaporation of water for the entire Southwest. And if we gave part ownership to immigrant workers and farmers in the Imperial Valley, they might be incentivized to be much more careful about the waters they use to grow America's crops. So final 30 seconds, 5 to 7 million gallons wasted per fracked well. Stop fracking. Methane is lethal. It's taking our water. We have Eagle River closures, Mini-Wachoni, water is life, a balanced respect for the life that water provides for all of us is critical in the decisions that we're making now. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, Kat. All right, our next person in the queue is Bart Miller with WRA, Western Resources Advocates, and on deck we'll have Hannah Holm. And your 3 minutes starts now. Oh wait, not yet. If you could also state your name and affiliation before you start speaking, that would be great. All right, go ahead, Bart. Thanks.
Sure. Hi there, Bart Miller. I'm the Healthy Rivers Program Director at Western Resource Advocates. I'll jump right to some thoughts. There's a great bunch of material in the Thriving Watersheds sections. I think that title should be expanded to include healthy watersheds and rivers. And the actions need to be bold. I think among the issues that the plan doesn't quite get to is a clear assessment of the gap rivers are getting hammered by drought conditions, climate change, and we're seeing a lot of inadequate flows causing closures, voluntary or mandatory. So I think some clear measure of what the gap and what the problem is beyond just the flow evaluation tool. The in-stream flows section shows up as an action item 3.7. I think that it would benefit from not just lowering barriers, but creating kind of a goal or an outcome on that, and being clear about how folks get involved, and the partners, the state agencies like Colorado Parks and Wildlife that put that together. So that may need both river mile goals and staffing or capacity goals. Collaborative water sharing agreements shows up in the robust agriculture action 2.4, but I think there needs to be a real clear through line that those watershed agreements or sharing agreements can and should be directly connected to adding to stream and river health through adding water back. Third, the stream management plan, there's an item, action item 3.9. I think there's good ideas in there about frameworks for prioritizing, learning from what we've done, but I think also there needs to be a greater emphasis on environmental and recreational flows and implementing stream management plans that are out there today. That originally stream management plans were all about stream flow when it was first introduced at the Steamboat CWCB meeting about 5 years ago. That's gotten a lot broader, and I think we need to make sure we get back to the core need of environmental and recreational flows. Recovery program and endangered fish. Recovery program for endangered fish is noted as a tool on page 517, but there isn't really much on the funding and prioritization of how we can meet flow targets, address non-native species, and commit to things like releasing water from reservoirs and other creative solutions. So I think that section on recovery program should be more explicit about supporting that. It's a great opportunity for the state to build on what other partners are doing. And finally, just a general comment that I don't see a lot that clearly builds on the 2015 plan, which had clear actionable goals. And I think measurable, actionable outcomes should be permeate more of this update so we can have clear goals and we can measure against them. Thanks.
Thank you. Before I move on, Russ, do you want to talk about real quick the other ways people could be submitting comments to in case they don't want to put it all in their comments here?
Sure. So feel free to make a comment tonight if we run out of time, or if you prefer not to do it here. Certainly, we have email open as an option, but the preferable way would be to go on Engage CWCB and use the survey. There are 3 options for providing comment. The first option, when you go into that survey tool, which is available in Spanish as well, is to just have a general comment. So that's probably the comment you would make here. If it's a more specific section or a typo or something you're seeing, that's a second option that's open to you. And then if you're got a bigger letter or something like that you want to support, there's a third option for kind of uploading kind of bigger comments. So go to Engage CWCB and you'll be able to kind of, on the same page as you can read the plan, you can make a comment there.
Thank you. And we'll go over that at the end of today as well. And then before I move on, are there any CWCB staff that need to respond at this point? Okay. Go ahead, Russ.
I'll just say one of the things that we really tried to address in this plan is that with all due respect, a lot of the things that were called measurable goals in the first plan weren't exactly all that measurable. And what we learned through the process is that the way that we take stock and measures when we do our iterative updates. So when we do the technical update, that's our best opportunity for kind of identifying where we're at, where we need to change course. And so I think we've really taken some strides. And I think one of our directors at the last board meeting kind of really spoke eloquently to this, that sometimes we get a little bit lost in the detail of things where a number might sound good, but isn't exactly always achievable or realistic or understandable or defined. So in this plan, we're trying to take strides to honoring that through line from what we saw in the original plan, in some cases defining things a little bit better and sticking to a higher vision, recognizing that the true time we take kind of numeric analysis is when we do the technical update, and the ways that we count towards progress is by checking off the actions that we're committing to.
Great, thank you, Russ. All right, we'll get back at it into our queue. So the next person up is Hannah Holm, and then after that we'll have Abby Burke. So we can get Hannah queued up.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. My name is Hannah Holm and I work on policy for American Rivers. And my comment is that I would like to see watershed health, and specifically headwaters restoration through reconnecting degraded streams with their floodplains, more integrated into the plan's discussion of the need for more storage in the face of our diminishing snowpack related to climate change. So the naturally distributed storage that you can get by kind of refilling some of that, kind of re-wetting that sponge of those soils that can be accomplished by this kind of stream restoration can accomplish many of the purposes that we seek to get from traditional storage projects like dams and reservoirs, in terms of holding our water up high for longer and metering it out later in the season. So this kind of naturally distributed storage you can get from restoring these headwaters stream systems through methods like reintroducing beavers and having installing structures that mimic beaver activity, or restoring wet meadows through simple low-tech structures that stop gully erosion. Those kinds of activities can accomplish substantial storage at the same time as they provide improved habitat and can mitigate the risks of wildfire. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. All right, next we have Abby Burke. Oh, before we do that, any responses from staff? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Staff, you know how to raise your hand. So let me know if you need something. Okay, Abby, we'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Stacy, and thank you for hosting this listening session and for the opportunity to comment this evening. My comment is to pre-wildfire mapping and assessment of small order streams and wetlands. To me, the point of doing a pre-wildfire assessment would be to look at ecosystem functions, connectivity of waters and habitat, and potential stressors which could require near-term management to protect ecosystem services and functions that support our collective water supplies. The purpose of a functional assessment would be to evaluate current stream and wetland functions and predict or rank potential changes to a stream or wetlands functions that may result from wildfire, and direct management actions accordingly. The point of doing a pre-wildfire assessment of streams and wetlands is a sort of proactive resilience management. So when a wildfire occurs in a watershed, the freshwater assets are known and potentially managed in a proactive way to minimize harm to water supplies and habitats. I find section 3.3, which is create a wildfire-ready watersheds framework, to be really strong. And in my interpretation, pre-mapping may be included in this section, but I wanted to highlight this now. So can we bring pre-wildfire assessment and management of small order streams and wetlands forward? This is really important work because we just don't know when the next wildfire is coming, and it does threaten habitat and our water supplies. So thank you. Apologies for talking a little fast there in the beginning, and appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. All right, just a quick logistical, I'll give the hand signal if we're talking too fast, and Jeff will also give the hand signal since we're watching the timer anyway. So just keep an eye on us as you're talking. And thank you so much for accommodating everybody that's here. So our next person in the queue is Katie Gill with Kestrel Kuhn in the chat, on deck, excuse me. All right, Katie, are you back to finish up?
Yeah, sorry, I was speaking too fast. It's 3 minutes. I have too much to say. So I won't try to go through everything, just that I really hope that we can find on-site and off-site solutions, and really go more towards aquifer storage and recovery over highly evaporative, shallow warming surface storage, and various things that can help us preserve those critical riparian ecosystems within the Bear Creek Lake Park, because it's 1.8 miles of running rivers, and those can never be mitigated. I don't believe that you can mitigate for the loss of a flowing river and all of the habitat and ecosystem that surrounds it by planting trees somewhere else. So I just hope that we can do more, all of us, in conservation and innovative water storage solutions. And a number are being considered at this site already. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Katie, and thanks for your patience. All right, our next person will be Kestrel Kuhn, and then on deck is Casey Davenhill.
Thank you so much. My name is Kestrel Kuhn. I work with American Whitewater, and I'm based here in Colorado. I just want to thank everybody for your time to put this together, and also for everybody's hard and long work on the water plan. Specifically, we do appreciate the inclusion of river recreation in the water plan, but I do think that we can do more. And specifically, I think we can do more in terms of capacity and representation and measurable objectives and new tools for addressing river recreation in the water plan. A couple ideas, and we can expand on these in our written comments, but would be to add an entirely new full-time position at CWCB dedicated specifically to river recreation, and to coordinating with local Colorado communities that want to improve and expand upon their local recreation resources. Another one would be to make the Colorado Outdoor Recreation Industry Office an ex officio member of the CWCB, and to also generally increase coordination with their office. And thirdly, to add an additional seat or seats for recreation and for the environment to basin roundtables, to ensure that basin roundtables, to also ensure that basin roundtables have diverse representation through gender and race additionally. A few ideas for expanding the measurable objectives for recreation in the water plan would be measuring or counting public access points to rivers, the number of boatable days on various river segments and watersheds, and also the number of river miles and segments that are protected through various tools or new potential tools that are accessible to Colorado. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, our next person up is Casey Davenhill with Janae Malpas in the on deck position. Casey. Oh, I'm sorry, Beatrice Soto
we'll
is
take
on deck.
a very
and then
brief
Janae.
moment.
Sorry, Casey, go ahead.
The sound is breaking up for me just a little bit, but I just wanted to say that kind of in response to Bart's comment, the basin implementation plans are a good place to look for more details with respect to projects. And then of course, the process itself that the roundtables go through to work to identify projects and bring those projects forward for funding with some sort of coordination and local collaboration. I think it's really important to mention the value of each roundtable's basin implementation plan. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. And I juxtaposed the queue. Our next person is going to be Beatrice Soto with Janae on deck. And before we go on, just want to pause to see if any CWCB staff have anything to add or respond to. Okay, we'll turn it over to Beatriz. Go ahead.
Hi, buenas tardes, good afternoon. My name is Beatriz Soto. I'm the director for Protégete, the Latino arm of Conservation Colorado. And I want to thank the Water Commission and that you guys are all acknowledging the role of climate change and how that's going to impact our communities. But I would also like to add that the Latino community, drought and water is one of our top priorities and concerns. I hear this on a daily basis when I go out and organize in community. And I really feel like we need to update the needs and the commitment to equity. I see equity throughout the whole book, but not necessarily in the plan, but not necessarily specifically what that looks like, right? We need to make sure that it is actionable, it is measurable, and is enforceable what equity really looks like, and that we need to make sure that we have a range of voices that look to create a greater resilience plan in the face of climate change, of drought, of floods, and fires as well for the most vulnerable communities. It's really important that we increase the representation on the water boards and commissions, and that those commissions also have the opportunity to have payment for that time. A lot of community members cannot participate because of the lack of funding, and we need those voices and we need collaborative approaches towards water equity. I also encourage you all to hire a chief of equity, diversity, and inclusion that would be within the water board and DNR to make sure that equity, diversity, inclusion metrics are being met and that there is support within your office to achieve those goals. We also want to make sure that we are using nature-based solutions through community grants to improve our resiliency in the face of climate change that will require access to water, specifically in heat islands and more impoverished communities. This is essential for the resiliency of low-income communities, of Latino communities. And again, I encourage you all to really think about how we are diversifying who is at the table and making sure that we have diverse voices there. Another big concern is making sure that we not only have the voices of landowners and farmers, but we also have the voices of the people that are actually working the land and the workforce that is making sure that we have food on our tables, and making sure that the working class of the farming and the agriculture industry is at the table and has a seat and a safe space to really provide solutions that will work for them and for the economy of farming communities. Thank you. I appreciate all your work.
Thank you so much. All right, our next person is Janae, and while she's getting queued up, just want to let everyone know that we are at the end of our queue. So if you have a comment or question, go ahead and write your name and affiliation in the chat, and we'll get you in the queue so that we can extend our public comments. All right, Janae, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me and see me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. Okay, thanks. So yes, I'm Janae Malpass, and I'm with the Juniper Initiative. And I just want to say that I see that the state is committed primarily to water storage and reduction of water use, which is good, of course, but not so much in the expansion of reusing water. And with the expectation of increasing drought conditions and overall less rainfall, this seems like it could be a short-sighted or a short-term solution. And I'm just wondering why the state is less focused on reusing water as a long-term goal. And I may be answering my own question with my next statement, which is in relation to the water quality management portion of the plan. And while I understand this may not be realistic at this point in time, I just still really feel it's important to mention the detriment to our water quality, mostly due to heavy herbicide and pesticide use in many of our watershed areas. This includes Forest Service lands, agricultural lands, and also residential lands, WUI in particular. And again, I know this is a monster of a topic to address, but if we're talking water conservation, and this also has impacts on everything from wildlife to human health, I think this is something that we should also be focusing on more in the future. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Do any CWCB staff have any responses at this stage? Okay. All right, we're going to move on. Josh Kuhn is next with Kat Haber on deck. Go ahead, Josh.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to the staff and board for all of the hard work that you've done with this draft plan. I think it's an excellent start and just wanted to provide a couple suggestions for enhancement. Wanted to build upon Kestrel's comments around recreation. I think recreation needs to be highlighted in the plan to a greater degree and not necessarily clumped with the environment. There are different needs for recreation, different needs for the environment. There's also a lot of challenges around protecting recreational flows. Currently, a community has to build an artificial structure in the river in order to get a recreational flow. And there's some tension with environmental needs around that. So it'd be helpful to see the plan address some barriers around protecting recreational flows while also benefiting the environment. As Kestrel mentioned, I also think that the agency or interagencies need greater expertise and around determining recreational flows. There's a lot of great methodology and expertise to do that for environmental in-stream flows. I think this is lacking with recreational flow needs. And while the plan highlights the importance of agency partners with that, there can potentially be perceived bias with relying solely on partners to provide that information. So it'd be helpful to have the state step in with that need. And then lastly, around recreation, I think action 3.6 highlights a lot of the existing efforts that are ongoing. And my concern is that I think a lot of those efforts will be concluded in the coming years. And so then if the plan's not supposed to be updated by 2033, then there potentially could be a lack of focus on protecting recreation through the end of this updated plan before the next one is revised. I also have a comment around environmental flows and think that there could be language strengthened around determining consumptive needs at the local level versus non-consumptive needs to help determine what flows are needed to support fish and wildlife habitat. And then once those flows have gone through designated areas, they can support other downstream, downriver users. And it's important to highlight that so that we can meet agricultural, municipal, industrial needs as well. And then lastly, I want to build upon my colleague Beatrice, her comments around equity, diversity, and inclusion. And thank you for highlighting this in the plan. I know a lot of work has been done since the last plan until now. And one of those efforts has been the creation of the Water Equity Task Force. And I think that was a great start, but I would encourage an advisory board to be created since DNR doesn't have something complementary to CDPHE's Environmental Justice Task Force. So I see I'm basically out of time and will provide some written comments to further explain my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Any CWCB staff have any responses at this stage? Okay, I'll just do a quick reminder. If you'd like to do a comment, please write your name and affiliation in the chat and we'll get you in the queue. And with that, we'll move it over to Kat Haber.
Hi, everyone. Kat Haber. I live in Edwards, Colorado. I happen to be in Homer, Alaska now, and I'm speaking again because I just spoke very quickly about so many possible solutions. I thank each of you for serving at this critical moment. And again, I point out that climate change is not a future problem. It is here right now. I see it from my window. The marine food chain here in Alaska is acidifying. Every choice that we make today, every bold decision that you make as a policy board affects all of us. I so agree with the part about including workers, including women, and let's include Indigenous. For countless generations, they have known what it is to take care of waters in Colorado. Do we have any Indigenous guidance in our policymaking boards? What would it take for us to fully fund, absolutely abundantly fund these water projects? Life counts on all of us, not just human life. It's the bugs, it's the birds, it's the very animals that come down and drink from our rivers. If we cannot respect the water flow in our watersheds, in our river sheds, we cannot say that we are a species that understands how to relate with all of nature in this beautiful place of Colorado. In less than a dozen generations, we have completely altered our place here. We need to remember that we are just part of it, not dominating over it, not extracting from it, but a part of it. And what we do to our land and our water and our air, we do to ourselves. Please be bold, be radical, stand strong, elicit your superhuman powers. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I do not see anyone else in the queue. If you're calling in on the phone and have something to say, if you could select *9 on your phone, that will help you raise your hand. While we're waiting to see if anyone else has any other comments, Russ, do you want to walk us through again where people can make their comments after our session is over?
Sure. We'd ideally like to have all the comments outside of these listening sessions funnel in through engagecwcb.org. If it's not in the chat already, I'll ask one of my colleagues to pop it in there. But engagecwcb.org is where you can go and make a comment, a commitment, or share a story. We hope you take advantage of one or all of those options. Certainly looking for a lot of action coming out of this, just as we're going to be expected to implement the plan. We really need your help to do that. If you go on engagecwcb.org, you'll find the survey. It's in Spanish as well. And you'll have a few options. So option 1 is general comment. Option 2 is you have a specific edit to make and you can go chapter by chapter. Or option 3 is you have a letter or maybe some batch input that you want to upload for us. So you can take advantage of any of those options.
And Russ, when does the comment period end?
Public comment period will run through September 30th.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mary, I see a question from you. Do you want to ask it live? Okay, maybe we can just have staff address the question that's in the chat. Russ, if you want to do that. Like to know if actions to manage population growth, land use, and development are addressed in the plan, including green infrastructure and stormwater management.
Stacey, you want me to, I mean, I guess just broadly, we do talk about green infrastructure. We touch on stormwater lightly. Probably it's not necessarily inappropriate, but of course, as part of a larger one water ethic, stormwater is a piece of that. So it's certainly a component of what we're talking about. And then growth is certainly one of the pieces of comments that we've gotten a lot. It's a tricky thing. Again, as we think about the lens of what CWCB can do, we're not setting policy on who moves here or not. I will tell you, State Demographer's Office talks about, stopping growth is equivalent of stopping the economy too. So there's a lot of things bound up in that. I think we recognize the impacts of growth. It's certainly, along with climate change, one of the strongest drivers and signals in terms of what's going to drive demand up. We've also seen, lower growth projections of late, and certainly even from the first water plan too. So growth is certainly a topic in the plan. I don't know that we take a stance one way or the other on growth.
Thank you. All right, just a reminder that if you have a comment, please write your name and affiliation in the chat box. Lita, do you want to go ahead and ask your question or make your comment? Oh, thanks, Indira. Okay, I'm going to move on unless we have Lita wanting to make a comment.
El comentario que puse fue eso, aquí hay 69 personas o 61 en este momento. Qué bueno que nosotros, que somos los que estamos directamente involucrados en el proceso, que estamos más cercanos en el proceso, pudiéramos tener la opción de subir esa historia o que la subamos para empezar a generar un compromiso real. Porque hemos hablado de varios tópicos, de conservación del medio ambiente, de los ríos, de la migración, de cómo podemos las mujeres ayudar, de la parte indígena, de muchos factores, pero el compromiso comienza acá, comienza en casa. Y esta es la casa, empecemos a subir ese compromiso real que cada uno de nosotros pudiera hacer. Así que la invitación está abierta, 61 personas que podamos empezar a hacer un compromiso real. Gracias.
Thank you. All right, we have Rusty Lloyd in the queue. Go ahead.
Hello, thank you for putting on this listening session and allow us to feed input. Greatly appreciated. I'm Rusty Lloyd with Rivers Edge West, and you know, the water plan and CWCB have made heavy investments into riparian restoration and restoration efforts along our streams and rivers for many years. My comment is really germane to continuing to make investments in the stewardship and the maintenance of those areas. We have, our partners and many of the people across the state are using a lot of public and private funding to get restoration done, riparian restoration, control of invasive plant species, et cetera, et cetera. And I would like to just make a comment that we hope that the water plan will focus in on continued stewardship of those areas. So a lot of these streams and rivers and wildlife habitat can continue to trend in a positive way ecologically. And so I know the granting process is a difficult one, and it's really geared towards what you can accomplish in the acres. But I think if we lose sight of the stewardship and the longevity that some of these restoration sites need to have for not only full recovery, but even just, you know, I think decent recovery, we still need to make investments in the stewardship, the monitoring and the maintenance of these areas. So I hope the water plan moving forward focuses in on that, the long haul of these restoration efforts. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Rusty. And I'll just remind everyone that if you haven't selected a channel on the translation button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, either English or Spanish, you must select one of those in order to hear the interpretation. If you keep it off, then that assumes that you're bilingual and understand both Spanish and English, and you will not receive interpretation via your Zoom. I hope that makes sense to people. If you have questions, please put it in the chat. Are there any other questions for the public comment this time? This is a question, maybe Elizabeth, for you. There's a question about if we have this information in other languages besides English and Spanish.
We do not at this time. And thanks for that question, Adriana. We're really excited for the first time to have been able to translate the draft plan into Spanish. This is the first meeting we're able to offer language interpretation, which we're really excited to move forward. And thank you for bearing with us as we figure that process out and refine it. So we'll definitely take that comment into consideration. And at this time, we just have Spanish and English for those languages.
Can I add on to that as well, Stacy? Two things to note. One, on that last comment, if you go to Engage CWCB, there is a same kind of global icon, and you can, at least for the text that's on the website, select other options aside from Spanish. I think there's 4 or 5 options in total that are available there. So there is at least some additional translation capability. I also just wanted to say, as I'm just reminiscing on the growth is just such a tricky topic. When I say that we don't really take a stance one way or the other, I'm specifically talking about in the categories of good or bad. But obviously, I just want to add, as I'm listening to Rusty and contemplating some of the other comments that we heard tonight, how we grow absolutely is of critical importance. And I think the water plan does lay out a course for wise growth and collaborative growth that uplifts every area of the state. We cannot afford to do it any other way.
Thank you. And thank you for the specific language suggestions in the chat box. All right. So at this point, we are staying on until our public comment period ends at 5:50 to make sure that we have space for people that are getting here late and we don't close this early. So if you would like to hang out with us, I think that's great, but we're gonna just like stand by until somebody puts their name in the chat to say they have a public comment. So if you need to leave, that is totally great, and we really appreciate your time here tonight. Russ, do you have anything you want to add to close this out, and we can just hang out until if we get other people on the line?
Just to say, I'm eternally grateful for all the comments that we've heard tonight. This is what collaborative engagement and public service is about, working together. You know, we will do our best to accommodate these comments and all the comments that we get. In some cases, we may not always be able to do that, but I think it's important to see not only this as a means to the end of what's written in the plan. There are many things that happen in and outside of the plan, and I'm confident that through the processes we set forward, we can continue to collaborate and continue to double down on all these actions. And you know, the year after the plan is out, it will be important that we continue to do this. So like many things, we are starting down a road together, and I look forward to seeing you as we keep going through each milestone.
Thanks, Russ. It looks like we do have a couple more people in the public comment. Nothing like threatening turning off the meeting for people to get motivated. So we have a question from Katie Gill, and then we'll go to Amber Lynn after that. So Katie, if you want to go ahead, we'll get the timer going.
Yeah, hi, thank you. So I have a question about the technical update from 2019, and I will admit I haven't finished reading the plan yet. I do get some publications from Water Education Colorado, the Citizens Guides. They're extremely helpful. But the State Demographer's Office came out with some new population projections after the 2020 census. And the technical update, which sort of analyzed the water supply gap beyond what the 2015 plan did, you know, trying to update that projected supply gap. That was done in 2019. And I feel like, and I think I saw in there 8.5 million population in Colorado as the projection that was used in that technical update. And then the demographer's office came out with new numbers, which show the growth to be slower than that and predicting around 7.6 million. And it's only 1 million difference, but it could be a lot. And I realize, you know, on one hand, we think, well, let's be conservative. Let's store as much water as possible. But storage, especially surface storage, comes with so many costs and impacts. I want to make sure that we are looking also at the impacts of that storage and having the latest numbers in the demographer's projections. So is there a way that that technical update could be updated past the 2020 census, or is the plan going to be predicated upon the 2019 estimate that was before the census?
Great, insightful question, Katie. And I do not have the number in front of me, but you're absolutely correct. The state demand. So maybe just to back up, from the 2015 plan, we saw a pretty significant decline in the projections of growth in the state, largely at that time due to the fact that the original plan had numbers that were kind of pre the 2008-9 economic downturn that were used in that. Similarly, some of those projections, I'm sure, are inclusive of some of the declines that we saw recently over the past few years, just related to pandemic and other issues. So those numbers vacillate from year to year. This is why it's so important to check in on data. I always get a kick out of the people that say, well, we're always in a planning phase. Why do we keep planning? We got to do. Well, of course we have to do, but nobody's interested in your data the year after it's out because they want the latest data. And that's a hard trend to keep up with. So we do our best. We acknowledge that in the plan. It does, because we're using scenario planning, we actually have a range. So the number that it's stated in, I believe it's in chapter 2, it's kind of called out in the water plan draft of what the current projection from SDO is, but that tracks fairly closely with our weak economy scenario. So we do have it captured in the range of data. I have no doubt that that number will change, a few times over from year to year. And the next time we update the tech update, and honestly, these are multi-year processes. We know now start to finish to go through the tech update, the basin plans and the water plan. It's really 7 years. So we'll be starting that plan, update again in a couple of years, but we're really kind of more in a 26, 27 kind of update for the next tech update. So we will consider those numbers, but I do believe they're captured in the fan of data now.
Thank you. All right, we have 2 people in the queue, Amberlyn and Juan, and we'll start with you, Amberlyn, and if you could just have your name and affiliation at the start of your comments, that would be great. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Amberlyn Katzenberger. I'm an intern for CSU this summer, actually. I'm not a professor, I was an intern for the extension part of CSU, working with the this is probably too fast. With the Agriculture Research Station out in Grand Junction, now back in Fort Collins. And I just wanted to step in after listening to a bit and really advocate for some things that I've heard people touch on and some things that have been just reinforced this summer for me. Speaking with mentors is this switch from conservation to restoration and a push to start work on a complete restoration of historical hydrofluvial geomorphology and moving back from the use of reservoirs to move space or to move water through time and canals to move water through space back to the original systems that we've been given that it seems we know about, but moving back to using aquifers to store water through time and rivers through space. Rather than the current system of reservoirs and canals that was built up and through prior appropriation and everything. And these are struggles that we're seeing now. So I just wanted to urge with this water plan to start pushing for something there. And again, things people have touched on is incorporating Indigenous knowledge into these plans and more effective science communication. We're well aware how these systems work. And I think what needs to happen, it's all about action on the ground. And one of the ways that I think that action can be implemented is, the Colorado Water Conservation Board has a bunch of really wonderful grants. I think that investments in and incentives for action, specifically in soil restoration, given that agriculture is the foundation of our economies, which is the same as our ecology. And we can see all of these mirrors happening, and that's where we get this all-inclusive diversity being seen, is when we go back to our foundational structures and coming back to this, the natural system of things. And I understand that this takes a lot of time, years and years, but that's why I really want to push forward on this water plan, because it's 2022 and we've been in this drought for decades. And that sort of change needs to start happening now. Sort of radical things that another person, 20 seconds, someone else had touched on was the restoration of flows with things like dumping out these reservoirs and restoring our aquifers. So that's all I wanted to come on here and say. And also thank you very much for the opportunity to listen to everybody that came in to talk, putting these kinds of boards together. So thank you. So
thank you, Amberlyn. All right, next is Juan Roberto Madrid.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, Juan Roberto Madrid with Green Latinos. First, I'd like to thank the staff and Russ from CWCB for all the hard work you guys have been doing with the scoping projects last year and then getting to this point. I had a couple of points in looking at the update, and I think there's a bit of over prioritization on the increasing storage using traditional storage methods. So throughout the plan, they reference emphasis on traditional storage, descriptions of storage as a tool, pages 5 through 21. It's fairly nuanced. The update leans heavily elsewhere on new dams and new reservoirs, building new dams to hold water that doesn't exist, right? So we know we're looking at going into a three-peat of a La Nina year. So should we be thinking about that old traditional storage type techniques, or should we be doing what some of the other speakers have said, is looking at some of these other alternatives? I think there also needs to be more information on the gap between river health. So in the update and the technical appendix focuses heavily on gaps or risk for municipal and ag use, but it lacks a clear sense of the related gap on in-stream uses. So I think addressing that as well. And then I'll comment as both Josh and Beatriz from Protégete and Conservation Colorado, the commitment to equity. There's equity language that is used throughout, but the plan doesn't actually specify who's leading this equity work or how the equity work will be done. I think, I'd like to give kudos to the CWCB for the work you have done. I have been asking for language justice for the last 2 years that I've been attending these meetings, the technical meetings and the scoping phases and the equity stakeholder group. And so I'm thankful that it's now available in Spanish and that you guys are using live transcription interpretation for this. But I think we can we can go further. When I'm in the meetings, I hear that we're reaching the same 450 people, and how do we get beyond that? And so with my work with Green Latinos, when I'm going across the state, the Western Slope, up in Rangeley or down in La Jada or La Junta, or down in Durango, what I hear from Latinos is that they don't know about the water plan. They don't know what's happening. They hear we don't recreate the same, or they don't think we recreate because we don't recreate the same. We're not using Patagonia gear or equipment. So I think that commitment to equity and reaching out through possibly community trusted organizations or community trusted leaders to reach community that has been distrustful of government so that they can be engaged in the process. We know from the studies that have come out that Latinos are impacted more by climate change and the growing drought throughout the Colorado River Basin. And so I think they have a voice to lend to the conversation, and I would just encourage greater outreach on that end. Thank you for the work you have done to this point, and look forward to you guys doing more, and thank you for allowing this public comment period.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any other comments. If anyone has another public comment to make, if you could put your name and affiliation in the chat, or if you're on the phone, if you could select *9, that'll raise your hand. And we will just hang out for a minute until we see if there's other comments that come in. If you need to leave, thank you so much for being here, and please follow up with the engagecwcb.org website.
Stacy, I'm gonna go off camera and unless we have any other questions and just wait. I think just for those that are here and hanging out, we had discussions about this and I think we could probably do it either way and hang things up early, but it seems just to kind of honor and respect anybody that might be jumping on later or is trying to make rushing from something or into day work to get on this. We want to just make ourselves available. So we'll continue to hang out and maybe there's something in the chat.
Yeah, it looks like Ellie Benson, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. So,
Oh, Ellie, your audio is really soft.
oh,
I don't know if you could fix that.
better now?
Yeah, go ahead.
And I'm in the midst of moving, so sorry for no video. But Elle from Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, and I really appreciate your presentation today and your work to develop this draft plan and get public input. I think it'd be good to see if there are a measurable way to assess the impact that various flow decreases may have on different outdoor opportunities. And in the same vein, it'd also be good to see outdoor access be valued as more than just making an economic impact, although we do appreciate that component, but also something that has social benefits, like benefits to mental health and communities. And we can elaborate more on these in our written comments, but thank you so much.
Thank you. And just a reminder, if you have a comment, just write your name and affiliation in the chat. We are keeping the line open until 5:50 when our agenda said we would close public comment and then close out the meeting.
Stacy, if Elle is still on, I think it clipped and maybe others heard it, but I didn't hear that last part. You said other benefits such as something, social values. I just wanted to make sure I understood the comment. If you don't mind repeating, I'm so sorry.
Thanks, Russ. Elle, are you still there? She might not be on anymore.
Okay, well, we'll go back and listen. Maybe it was just me.
Okay.
I see that comment in the chat. Just thank you as well. Thanks for everybody for joining. It's really nice to see kind of all our friends that have given us comment tonight, including those of you we've not met before. So thanks for being on. Thank you, Katie.
All right, Russ, it's 5:50. Why don't we officially close this out and call it good?
Just double check, Elizabeth. Does that feel like a good game plan to you? I do think we're kind of at the end. If somebody jumped on now, we could always, take additional comments online, but I don't feel like we're going to get any surgeons here at the end.
Yeah, I think so. And like Stacey mentioned, I think public comment on the public agenda was going until 5:50. So really appreciate everyone who took time to come on and share their thoughts with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all so much. We'll see you. If you want to attend the next one, you certainly can. We'll be very similarly run, all of them. We plan to kind of handle the same way, but we will definitely be kind of going back and listening to these, taking these comments and anything additional you send us. It's so important for us to all engage in public processes like these. So thanks for taking the time.
Great. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you back at the next one, maybe. Take care.